Okay, here we are. It is 11:30 and we have had a great day so far of some wonderful speakers, and we have a couple left here that we're very excited about. So before we jump into our next presentation at 11:30, we of course want to hear from our sponsors, AMPI and Farmers and Merchants State Bank. So let's hear from them.
AMPI, we are Associated Milk Producers, the largest cheese cooperative based in the U.S. We are 1,500 farm families and 1,050 employees driven by a shared purpose, feeding people. In 2019, AMPI dairy farmer owners marketed 5.1 billion pounds of milk, resulting in $1.7 billion in sales. Our dairy farmers collectively own 8 Midwest-based manufacturing plants where skilled employees use members' milk to produce 10% of the nation's American-type cheese, processed cheese, and butter. Our award-winning dairy products are marketed to food service, retail, and food ingredient customers. We make the dairy products that make the brand. AMPI. Visit ampi.com for more information.
You can grow with them, you can partner with them. I'm talking about Farmers and Merchants State Bank, of course. And you don't even have to be a farmer or a merchant. It's where my parents do their banking. My grandma has her IRA, and my uncle got a mortgage for his home in the country. You know why they love it? Because friendly still counts. Visit fmpeers.com, also in Sauk Rapids and Eden Valley. Farmers and Merchants State Bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Did you know you can bank, borrow, and save with Farmers and Merchants State Bank? From ag lending to personal banking, they offer a big range of services with small town service, including online banking and their mobile app too. So, what are you waiting for? Switch to Farmers and Merchants State Bank. Visit fmpeers.com to get started. Also in Sauk Rapids and Eden Valley. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Because friendly still counts.
Hi, everyone. Say welcome. And I'd like to please welcome Leif Fixon from the Nature Conservancy. He is here to speak about ecosystems service markets. So we welcome him today and take it away.
Let's go into slideshow mode. All right. Well, thanks for that intro, Bonnie. I'm Leif Fixon. I'm an ag strategy manager for the Nature Conservancy. We are a global nonprofit, got our start here in the US, initially kind of doing land conservation. So a lot of the prairie preserves, as well as a bunch of kind of old growth forest, riparian type parks and preserves were kind of our initial bread and butter. And about 10-15 years ago now, we started to really gear up in the ag space. And, overall, we kind of have 3 main goals: tackling climate change, protecting land and water, which is what I just got done talking about, and provide food and water sustainably. And that's where my work mainly lives. We are a science-based organization. About a quarter of our employees are scientists, and that's really what we use to guide kind of our programming and our partnerships. And today I'm here to talk about a really great partnership that is launching here in the St. Cloud area. So central Minnesota, it's focused on the Sauk River watershed, and it's piloting what we're calling ecosystem service markets. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, a version of this is a carbon market. You also hear it called water quality trading. And the general premise is that rather than investing like hundreds of millions of dollars on a point source type pollutant or pollution discharger, so say like a wastewater treatment plant or a large manufacturing facility with a smokestack, we can get the same environmental outcome by investing in agriculture and in practices that both reduce ag's impact from a non-point source side of things, as well as straight up like mitigate and sequester additional carbon and like water quality impacts beyond what their own footprint is. Is that, I hope that makes sense. So the idea, and so the key part there is in a much cheaper fashion, right? So we get the same environmental outcome for a reduced rate. So the other side of this that I'm going to talk a lot about today is on the corporate kind of social responsibility side of things. So think a Cargill or a Target Corp, has announces a goal of we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint by 30%. Okay, how are you going to do that, and how are you going to track that? So a lot of times that gets lumped in with this, what you'll hear referred to as trading. So this conversation here in Minnesota really started around a group that's come together the last couple of years called HASP, and that's the Headwaters Agricultural Sustainability Partnership. It's a group of kind of ag and conservation folks who have come together to say, hey, we like working with each other, and we think there's some good synergy in working with each other. And we've got a few different projects already launched. There's some stuff looking at the economics of conservation, and now this pilot kind of demonstrating ecosystem service markets, and so that's kind of the group that came together and said, hey, we want to do this. How can we do it? And so all the partners you see on this page started kind of brainstorming, and ultimately we said, well, there's a huge buzz right now with a lot of these different platforms that are coming out that are focused on ag, that are basically creating a platform for trading, essentially conservation practices that a farmer implements and generates an ecosystem service. So think carbon sequestration or reduced runoff, stuff like that, and links it with a buyer. And so we started shopping around for a platform that we'd potentially like to get involved with. And a bunch of the partners you saw on that last page were already engaged with an organization called the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. And we thought it made a lot of sense to basically pilot this platform. And there's a number of reasons why we chose ESMC is what I'll refer to it kind of moving forward, in that it's one platform that allows for both a carbon credit as well as a water quality credit and a water quantity credit to be defined and traded or sold. The next thing, and this is a really important one for us at TNC, is that it's a nonprofit. So at the end of the day, their goal is to get more conservation on the ground in a cost-effective way. They're not necessarily in this to try and make money off the farmer or make money off of this interaction. It's a nonprofit. The other big thing is to note is that it offers both, and I'll talk more about this later, but a voluntary credit, so like that corporate supply chain kind of credit pathway, as well as a regulatory or a tradable credit. So there's kind of two different pathways, and that ties into the cost behind what it costs to make some of these and validate, measure, and track some of these credits. The protocols are open to members of ESMC, which is really important, in that it's not a black box. We can see how the numbers are being crunched. It bridges and balances a good mix of technology and remote sensing with on-the-ground soil testing. So there's still a soil core being pulled up and measured and said, okay, over the last 5 years, you put this much carbon in the ground. This is another big one for TNC. It works on both row crop acres as well as grasslands acres. So, tying back into some of our goals for protecting and preserving grasslands, this is a good one. Their overall approach to this is they're intentionally piloting their platform across the U.S. in different growing regions as well as climates. and then they're going to launch a public kind of marketplace. So the idea is that hopefully we get all the bugs worked out and we make sure that everything's real and works before we jump to a full-fledged marketplace. And then it's industry led, and it's got a lot. It's a consortium, so which is really great. So rather than all these different organizations and companies going out and trying to launch their own platform, they came together and said, let's work together, do one that is good, robust, defensible, and hopefully will have some momentum behind it. As I said, they're testing this. They're launching pilots kind of across the U.S. to make sure that both the algorithms and kind of the protocols behind how they're measuring the ecosystem benefit works in different cropping systems and environments. And we're up here in Minnesota, kind of one of the northern ones in a row crop setting. So diving into the specifics of our project here in central Minnesota, the partnership that I'd mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that we weren't just focusing on carbon and that we were also looking at water quality. And so you'll hear folks talk about scope 1 and scope 3 a lot when it relates to agriculture and generating credits or assets. You'll hear them referred to as well. And the difference really here is anytime you hear somebody say scope 3, really think like, okay, this work is happening directly underneath kind of your supply chain footprint. So it would be like say a Target wanting to reduce their carbon footprint, working with I think I saw AMPI as a sponsor, so they could work with, if they're buying cheese from AMPI, they could work with AMPI, and then AMPI would work with their farmers. That would be an example of a scope 3 project, right? Like there's direct line of sight for this product on our shelf that we have to look at. We have to count that carbon footprint going to that farm. Scope 1 is kind of categorized into two different categories. One is credits that would go towards a regulatory permit, as well as say a Delta Airlines wanting to reduce their carbon footprint through buying through buying ag carbon, right? So it's the supply chain's not connected, separate. So that would be scope 1. So our project is going to be focusing on kind of both voluntary carbon in a scope 3 fashion, as well as scope 1 carbon, so a tradable credit, and then scope 1 water quality. So we're hoping to work with kind of a lot of the municipalities in the area and see if they're potentially interested in buying some of the water quality credits that the pilot would generate. Our goal is to get 50,000 acres enrolled, and we ultimately kind of selected the SOC for a number of reasons. One is, where some of these pilots that are launching in other parts of the U.S. have kind of either a sponsor or somebody who wants that carbon. So there's a pilot in Kansas that's sponsored by General Mills, right? General Mills is working with their kind of supply shed, their mill shed, their farmers down there to implement soil health practices, and then they're going to be counting that carbon towards their greenhouse gas footprint. Ours didn't have that kind of upfront sponsor, and so what we did was we looked around the state and said, okay, where do we have a lot of both state and federal cost share programming for soil health practices touching down, as well as some good partners. And so quickly we narrowed in on the Sauk River watershed. We've got a great partner there with the Stern Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as a bunch of other folks that are already established, working together. This is kind of the heart of that HASP organization that I was telling you about. And so we touched it down there. We also wanted an area that had a heavy livestock area, because both to test out how livestock integrated into the SMC platform, as well as we know that it makes it a little bit easier to integrate cover crops. Having livestock there that can either eat or ultimately eat that cover crop, it makes it a little more financially easy to integrate that. And then we wanted downstream water quality trading buyers. The overall goals of the pilot really is to look for efficiencies. You know, this isn't a new idea, this whole carbon trading, water quality trading. And what's typically derailed these efforts in the past is the overall cost associated with kind of defining, measuring, validating, and tracking those credits. And we think that there's enough technological advancements now, both through remote sensing and being able to utilize kind of big data that the farm's already generating to reduce that cost. But we still need to find more efficiencies, both in how do we get the data, how do we get the soil testing done, all that kind of stuff. So there's this efficiency side of things, and then there's some economic drivers that we locally really want to dive into, and that's related to kind of whole farm accounting. How can we use this on edge of field acres, so acres that are in grass waterways, buffers, pasture, stuff like that. And then with the livestock component, we're really curious as to what is the potential amplifying effect of manure on the generation of carbon and water quality credits. And then we're working with the University of Minnesota to see how some of their forever green crops can play a role in helping generate some ecosystem service credits. So ferns, there's a few others, pennycress, stuff like that. So we're estimating roughly 125,000 tons of carbon will be stored over the 5-year project. That's an estimation, maybe more, maybe less. That's one of the challenges with a lot of this carbon world, is that it's very nuanced and can be very variable. So don't just anytime anybody says we'll do exactly this, question that. The way the process works for the farmer is overall year one, the farmer enrolls, agrees to implement a practice change, which is typically a soil health practice. So cover crop. And they have to do a soil test. They pull a soil core, and that establishes that field's baseline. Then each year moving forward, the farm's kind of agronomic data, so crop inputs, fertilizer, passes over the field, and ultimately the yield of the crop all get put into the ESMC platform. It does some modeling and number crunching behind the scenes, taps into a remote sensing program called Optus to validate that yes, cover crops or reduced tillage was implemented on these acres, and then it generates essentially a carbon yield that can either then be turned into a credit and sold on a marketplace that's going to be launched in 2022, or it can go, and be accredited to a supply chain partner that farm may be working with. And then every 5 years, there's going to be a follow-up soil test as a true-up. And this is a big thing that we like at TNC, in that it's not based off all on modeling. There's going to be a true performance kind of check in this, and so the farms that are going above and beyond as it relates to soil health practices, we'll see it show up in that 5-year kind of true up. This is a list of kind of all the different practices that can be eligible for generating credits. Some of these are going to be just water quality related. Some of them are going to be carbon. Some are going to be both. That's the sweet spot. But we're anticipating for at least the first year of this pilot, a lot of focus being on cover crops, reduced tillage, precision nutrient management, stuff like that. The way the producer gets involved is producer says, hey, I'm interested. They can either work through one of the partners that we'll have, and I'll share this website at the end, listed to get enrolled, and they'll go then to the ESMC portal, enter their data and the fields that they want to enroll, and then the process kind of kicks off from there. The ESMC platform will generate a map that says you need to go pull soil cores from these locations, and then that's kind of how that 5-year process kicks off. The other pathway is to work through, say, Centrasota is a partner of ours up in this neck of the woods. So say you're already working with Centrasota, you already have your data on their platform. they're a True-Terra dealership. We can work pretty seamlessly through that pathway as well, and that they're developing kind of APIs, what they say. So basically, if your data is in the True-Terra tool, the two computer programs can talk to each other, and it reduces that cost of data entry. Funding for this pilot is primarily coming from NRCS. We got a grant from them that required a 1-to-1 match. To come up with that, we're leveraging some in-kind contributions from the Department of Ag through their Ag Water Quality Certification Program. And then TNC is putting up some cash on the table as well. And that HASP group I mentioned earlier, they've got a return on investment study going on that we're also leveraging to meet the NRCS match. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all the indirect funding that is being, I guess, indirectly leveraged for this. So all the existing cost share that's already going in there, all the existing investment that the farmer is making, be it through equipment or willingness to adapt a conservation practice, our pilot wouldn't work if it weren't for these established programs that are already there. We've got 4 farms that we enrolled last fall, kind of as some, like our test cases to see how they go, and we're now moving into kind of a massive enrollment period where we're going to try and get the 50,000 acres. We've already conducted like our enrollment specialist training with a lot of the different farmer advisors and the SWCD staff to get them trained up on how to get folks into the platform. And one of our goals is to recruit that upfront potential project sponsor for the carbon or water quality credits that will be generated. The backup plan is that in 2 years, when the marketplace is up and running, the credits that will have been generated over the next 2 years will just be put on that marketplace and traded or sold at market value. So with that, I'll put this up on the screen. We're going to be driving everybody to this acresforwater.com/ESMC to learn how to enroll. We're still building out that website, but there's a bunch of good baseline data on there about the platform. We should have that website fully up to date by middle of next week. So otherwise, questions can come to me, Stacy Cushenberry with ESMC. And then if you already have relationships with SWCD or Centrasota or one of the other partners that I had up on that slide earlier, feel free to reach out to them. Questions?
Yeah, Leif, hey, there's one question. We're going to jump back to the soil testing. What will show up in the soil in 5 years to explain the success?
Yeah, so the two things that, well, it depends on what we're looking at, right? So if it's a water quality credit that we're going after, the big one we're tracking there is phosphorus, as well as potentially infiltration, though we're not doing infiltration tests. So there's going to be some modeling for the water quality side of things. As it relates to the carbon, it's a combination of both density and actual soil organic carbon in the soil that will be used to track. So, and the ESMC they've got kind of some equations behind the scenes there that will be calculating that. The one thing that I really stress for anybody who wants to get involved in this is a pilot. Don't have all the answers. Anybody who claims they do when it comes to carbon trading, take a definite step back and ask some questions. I'll just leave it there. So there's a lot of variability when it comes to carbon testing in soil, but we're hoping that between remote sensing, the soil test, and potentially some new sensors that are coming online, we'll be able to get a realistic measurement of improvement in that field.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Leif. So we have another question. Can farmers that are not in the Sauk watershed district, can they enroll?
Yes. So the way the grant and the overall project is set up is that we have a focus of the Sauk, but it's not limited to the Sauk. So we just had a meeting about this. So we're going to be kind of expanding really just for logistics and stuff like that. We're basically kind of seeing the sock and a 30-mile radius around it. So, so it's central Minnesota. There are a few caveats there. The water quality credit market development, we're probably going to be really focusing on the sock, right? And so if you're outside of that watershed, you may not benefit from, like right away from a water quality credit being sold just because you're in a different watershed. But we're anticipating, like the other goal with the grant from NRCS is that we build out infrastructure at the state level so that this thing can scale up. So, and this is the benefit of using a platform like ESMC. There are some other one-off kind of water quality trading programs out there in the state. The challenge there is that there's just a lot of overhead and a lot of work involved. When you say the city of Mankato is contracting directly with these 20 farmers upstream, this would simplify and allow for a more scalable approach to. They could just look at this marketplace and, hey, yeah, I'll just buy those credits there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that answers it. Okay, there are no other questions. So Leif, thank you for your presentation today, and all of you who attended, thank you for attending. On your screen, you can choose to leave the room and go back to the main area and wait for the next presentations. Okay, thanks all.
Thanks.